We are live.
Welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here to try to make the world seem a little more normal in these dire times. But as we know, that's not easy. But my guest today is Dante Rusciolelli. And I totally just screwed that name up, but it's all good. His name's on the screen, and it'll be on the episode if you want to see it. So, Dante, how you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, I mean, look, if anyone else can pronounce it better than you, let them try. I don't even know how to pronounce my last name. I think it's pronounced SpaghettiOs. I'm not kidding. Maybe. Who knows? I don't even know. And I'm
Uh,
sorry about moving around. My computer is in the house. If my phone gets low, maybe I'll have to switch there. But for now, you've got me on my phone.
it works for me. It works for me. So, first question I asked everybody in this show: what got you into the paranormal?
I would say nothing because I am not even the kind of person that brings up the stuff I've seen. And I've rarely seen anything on television that compared to what I've seen. So I don't know if I'm into the paranormal or if I just believe because I've seen. Does that make sense?
It
Because
does.
I'm
A lot of people.
okay.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna
Uh,
say, like, my wife is a star of a bunch of horror movies, also, and paranormal movies and things like that. And I don't even watch her movies because it's not my. I like the stuff if it's interesting to me, but it has to be the right one for me. You know what I mean? Like, I won't go watch everything about paranormal activity or ghosts or UFOs. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, I personally am not that big a horror movie fan to begin with either. But I mean, I've been watching a lot. I've been watching a lot lately. But other than that, that's for a podcast, and I've watched a bunch a couple months ago for a podcast as well. But other than that, I'm not the biggest horror movie fan either. I'd much rather watch a comedy or a
Same,
good rom
same.
or a good
Yeah.
rom com. But I mean, that's just me. But
So I
I
guess I'm
will.
setting it up for people who are listening to your show that go, okay, it's a bunch of guys that like to come on here and tell each other a bunch of lies that they've seen, that they've made up for each other because they're all into this, and you can't have a podcast unless everybody's seen. I'm not that guy. I don't care about any of this. I don't. I It's not part of my focus, but I believe 100%. I believe because I've seen it with my own eyes, and it was unexplainable, and I've never seen anything like it since, past, present, anything.
Yeah, which I get that, and I mean, I've always been into the paranormal. It's just the way it is for me. But that's just because things like Bigfoot and Loch Ness monster when I was a kid amused me and made
Same.
me
I'll
want to.
agree with that. Yes.
They made me want to believe in this world that we don't understand. That there's more out there than we could ever know, and that mystery keeps life alive when you feel down in life. That mystery gives you purpose almost. And I mean, among other things, of course. But so that's mainly why I believe, and it's not everybody has to believe the same way. I am a
And
full
that's a
believer
fun
in that.
reason. You opened it up to it when I was a kid. I wanted to learn about these magical worlds that may or may not be real. And that's fun. That's exciting to me, honestly. When I was a kid, it was probably my most exciting thing was to learn about things like this and ESP and anything like that.
Exactly. I mean, hell, J.K. Rowling made herself a millionaire just by going into this world a little bit, just on one side of it. Even she didn't really embrace everything, even, but
You
she
got
just
that
went in
right.
on one. She went in on one side, and now she's a millionaire. So people definitely like to go use this part just to explore different aspects of it, which I love and I do, and I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, so I will say that. But
Same.
first things, I think there's very few out there who aren't. But
Yeah.
first things, first question I will ask is, so you have experiences as you told me off camera. Why don't you jump into one of those experiences and pick whichever one you want, and we'll see how it goes.
All right. Why don't I start with ghosts? Because the ghost one isn't as it's not backed up by anyone, whereas the UFO one is. So I'm going to start with my ghost experience. So
Sounds
when
good.
I was a kid, my great grandmother and great aunt came to live with me, and well, with my parents to help raise me. And my great aunt died, and so I moved into her bedroom. And then my parents had a big party one night, and I went to bed. And I think I woke up. It's like 3 in the morning or whatever, and I see like a flashlight light coming down my hallway, and I was like, oh, it must be my dad doing something. And then I got really scared because I thought, oh no, burglars carry flashlights. Why would my dad not just turn on a light? So I got very upset, and I put my eyes on my whole head, kind of like no one's in bed. I just covered it up like if there's a ghost or someone, you won't see me because I pulled covers over my head. So what I did was very slowly, I pulled my eye out so I could look, and there was just like in Ghostbusters, a free floating, full torso, vaporous apparition, and it was real. It was standing like flowing bright light in my hallway at my door. And I realized it was my Aunt Betty. And she was just looking in at me, and my great grandmother's bedroom was directly across from mine. You could see her door was closed from my bedroom. Aunt Betty turned around, went right through the door and went into her room. I jumped up as fast as I could. I ran to my parents' bedroom. I was screaming. I tell them everything. And they said, you had a nightmare. At this point, I'd been awake for a good 10 minutes. From time I saw the light to me panicking and like barely breathing under my covers. None of this was a dream. We know the difference between a dream and you know, you don't run to your parents after you've been sitting up and panting and all these other things. So that was my only real experience. I will say this, like my mom went to a place, and she said that the next morning she went downstairs. It was like a small hotel or house that this lady took her to. And she said, sorry about this. She said that when she woke up the next day, she said, who is that man with the dog that walked into my room? And all the women said the same thing. And they go, well, it's a ghost. There's a man who walks his dog here at night, and he's not real. And they all saw him, and it was very strange. But this wasn't long after I had seen what I saw. So my mom, I think, came around and started believing me more.
Which makes sense. I mean, and parents always try to use the "oh, you had a nightmare" idea when we're kids instead of admitting that we may have seen something because they don't want to scare us. I mean, it's reasonable, it's logical, but
Yeah. Or
they
you
do.
know what? I told my daughter, I'm like, if you ever see a ghost, they can't hurt you. So just talk to them. Be friends. You know, like if you can finally have that kind of opportunity, I wish I had a different opportunity as an adult. Of course, as a kid, you're terrified out of your mind, and everything scares you, and something terrible lives under your bed. But you know, I think that is one of the things. Like now, if I saw a ghost, I wouldn't run. Why would I? What am I afraid of? You know, no one.
Exactly.
It's not like on the nightly news, people are like, and strangely, another ghost has killed another human being. It's just not
Mm.
happening. So if you see one, I'm gonna want to go see them. But I wanted to tell you the UFO experience is the one that really messed me up, and I'll tell you why. So I grew up on a military base called China Lake. It was very secretive when I was growing up there. It was called Naval Weapons Center China Lake, and now it's called something else, NAS or I don't know what. But when I was growing up
I've
there, they invented the Sidewinder missile. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've heard of China Lake.
You
I know
have?
I have. I know
Yeah.
I have it in some podcasts, but
A lot of not millionaires, a lot of book writers of science fiction and stuff add it to their books a lot because it was a very secretive base, sort of like Area 51 and all of that. You know, we like I would see drones as a kid, these giant drones, unmanned, you know, and we just thought it was the next airplane coming out from, and then we would be like, well, I guess it never came out because we never saw it, and it was weird. But, you know, there's a lot of things like that. There were, you know, we just knew the base was making things. But one night I was outside, and this isn't the big one. I'm just telling you my first encounter. I'm outside on the base, and I look up in the sky because I saw a flash of light. And sure enough, a bolt of light comes right over my house, almost like if lightning were on a train going by. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. If a train was made out of lightning and went by kind of slowly, that's what I watched go over my house. I tell my dad, he tells me to call radio stations. No one saw it, no one heard it. So move on to about 20 years ago. I was married and living in the valley of Los Angeles, here in Los Angeles. And I lived in, I don't even remember, Winnetka. And my wife and I had gone out onto the porch. I don't know if we were there to watch our kid or have a cigarette. I don't know what we were there for. I can't even tell you. We're outside and we're sitting on the porch, and it's daytime, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I look up and I say to my wife, oh, that's weird. There's like a balloon up there that you can see. There's something shiny in the daytime sky. And she goes, that's a star. And I was like, it is? And she goes, look, there's like 5 of them right there. together. I'm like, wait a minute. How is it that I've never seen a star in the middle of the day? I'm like, those are balloons or something. She's like, no. And then all of a sudden, they formed a circle of 5, sort of like this, and started to rotate in that circle. And that's when we both went, what the fuck is that? Now I run to my uh, into the back room to try to grab a video camera. Back then, 20 years ago, you didn't have cameras on your phones. The video camera you had was 10 years old and shitty, and it couldn't zoom in on the fucking sky. Like, you can't even pull the moon out with these old video cameras, let alone a
Yeah.
star. So I'm not even able to like catch it. At this point, my neighbor comes outside, this older man, John, who's still alive. He comes outside and he goes, what? And I go, look, right there. We pointed out to him, and sure enough, he sees it now. He's watching these 5 stars spin in a circle. And then all of a sudden, as we're looking, they all take off like lightning. I was watching some UFO show on Netflix at some point recently, and for the first time, I saw someone describe it identical to what I said. After 20 years of telling people this story, and my ex-wife knowing the same story, and this man, John, who watched it with us, we all saw it together. Finally, I'm starting to hear other people talk about this circle of stars that shoots off at the end. And I don't know what it is. Have you ever heard of this before, Jeremy?
Well, I mean, I haven't heard the circle part per se, but it's funny you say the star thing because that's how my UFO experience kind of happened as well. I mean, it was nighttime. Well, evening. It was getting darker, and we were walking in to my now wife, then girlfriend's house. We were coming up the back porch, taking the kids inside for the night. And my son says to me all of a sudden, he's like, "Why are those stars moving?" And I'm like, I probably was drinking at that point. So I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And then like I look up and I'm like, "Oh." And there was
Wow.
8 or 9 star-looking things moving in the same direction. I mean, it looked like they were far away from Earth at that point, but they're moving the same direction, and they're moving at the rate that the human eye can tell they're moving. Which, if the human eye can't
Usually
see
that's something
stars,
like a satellite. And sometimes I mistook satellites for that, but not 9 in a row. That's
hmm
crazy.
exactly. And they're in a formation kind of, but not any like letter formation. It was just like a cluster formation, and they were just going in the same direction. And I mean, it looked like they were pretty far up in space, so they were away from Earth, but they were just. I mean, and my wife lived near the Bridgewater Triangle at that time, so which is in Massachusetts and has a lot of paranormal activity.
Wow.
So I mean, there definitely could have easily been aliens. There's a lot of reports of UFOs and aliens in the Bridgewater Triangle,
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
so, I mean, it's funny that you said stars though, because that's how my son got my attention is he said stars are moving. I'm like, we can't see stars move, but these weren't stars apparently.
Yeah, man, it's a crazy thing, and for me to have it finally reaffirmed, it wasn't a flying saucer. I didn't see anything anyone else was talking about, but to finally see it on Netflix recently, and I wish I could think of what it was. But it's something that just recently came out, one of those UFO shows. I only watched it like a month ago. And when I watched it, my wife went, honey, that's exactly what you've been describing. And she points it out. It's a different wife, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, my ex-wife, same thing, man. She never forgot that. It was the craziest thing I've ever witnessed. Oh, I didn't even tell you what happened. So I called a bunch of radio stations because I live in LA. I'm a kind of well-known stand-up comic. I just go by Dante. I now own a entertainment company and have lots of celebrities that I manage and stuff like that. But back then, I was writing for a big radio station here. Plus, I was a big comic, so I had no problem getting right through to the DJs and being like, "Hey, man, it's Dante. Has anyone called in about a UFO?" No. All right, thanks. I called all of them, right? So then I decide I'm going to call the FBI. There's a field office I used to live across the street from. Why not? I'll call them. I'll report it. So here's exactly what happens, man. When you call the FBI and you say, I saw something in the sky, and here are my exact words. I remember how I said it. I go, I don't want to call it an unidentified flying object, but I just witnessed 5 unidentified flying objects. And I heard this on the other line. I swear to God, I heard, go on. I was like, all right, you're not making me feel too confident, my friend, but I have a couple of witnesses. None of us have been drinking. None of us are, on drugs or anything like that. I told him the whole story I told you. And he goes, so what am I supposed to do with this? And I said, I don't know, man. I'm letting you know in case anyone else calls in. All right. But I'm just letting you know. He goes, I said, since you're not obviously not taking me that serious, can you tell me the best option for me? He goes, what you should honestly do is call the FAA and let them know. So I call the FAA. The FAA gives me instructions and says, call the FBI back and tell them this. So I call back the FBI, and here's what I get. Hello, FBI? And I go, hey, man, it's the UFO guy. And I hear, go on. So I told him whatever information FAA said, and he's like, yeah, I'm writing that down. Thanks again for being a concerned citizen, sir. And that was it. That was the extent of it. I've repeated it to a few friends. I don't even think I've ever talked about it on a podcast or on TV or anything. So you might be the first one that's ever broadcast this to the world, because it's not on my radar. You know what I mean? I even have a client whose husband had that one of those paranormal shows, Ghost Hunters or something. I don't know. But you know, like I said, it's not my thing unless I'm super interested in it at the time. Like you as a kid, I loved Sasquatch and all those things. As an adult, there's other things that interest me that are more in this realm. But you know, these were kind of outside of what I ever think about. I don't think to repeat them. I feel like, of course, there's people in space. You know, we're the only people, or you know, existence in the world. Of course, there's some other forms of. And then I had a weird thought. I smoke a lot of pot, but I wasn't smoking pot back then. I only started recently. So,
I mean, I've been smoking pot for almost 20 years, but yeah, same.
right. So what I wanted to say is pot opens up your mind sometimes. Sometimes you go, oh, wow, man, that's a cool idea. I had one of those the other day. When I was thinking about this, about coming on your show, I thought, wow, what if UFOs or whatever most people are actually seeing are our government giving futuristic or going back into the future tour group things where people can go, hey, this is what the earth looked like back then. And, you know, maybe it's not even the American government. Maybe it's the world government or who knows what. But I also think there's also people out in space. But I do think that since we're getting so many people coming here and like probing and things like this, I'm almost wondering if we're being examined by our own people from the future.
You are not the first person I've heard to give that idea out. I mean, it's it's been proposed before that what if the aliens that we see nowadays are just future humans, and
Future us, yeah.
they're going back in time to either try to help us and develop things, or they're going back in time to just like you said, like they could be just time travel tours. Pay a couple $1,000 and go back 200 years, 1,000 years, and see how what the Earth was like back then. It's highly, highly possible, but I don't know. I mean,
I don't know,
I just
man. It's just a thought, but I think it's more highly possible that there's life out there. I mean, it's silly to think that we're alone in space because all you need is the right few things to get life. And water is the key element. So if there's water somewhere, or maybe not, maybe there's other life forms that don't need water in this universe.
oh, I mean, there definitely are. I mean, it's been basically. I mean, Mars had to have life at one point, and there was water at one point on that planet, but and I mean, a couple months ago, well, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago now, there was a picture of from a satellite or from a probe that we sent out of what looked like almost like a warthog or like a wild boar on Mars. So I don't. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
don't.
totally believe that there's life out there. It's silly to think otherwise, and I'm a skeptic of a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like for me, even though I grew up reading every book on Bigfoot and like I lived in the Sierra Nevadas, and I always thought I was going to see one and all this stuff. Once I kind of grew up, I had a friend that I was like, we were on the same team for a while. We both love Bigfoot team, and then he started saying shit to me that sounded too crazy, and I was like, I can't be on the Bigfoot team with you because he kept saying to me, I was like, well, man, if there's a Bigfoot, how come the people who invented Bigfoot claim that they didn't that it's all a hoax? And he's like, because they don't want you to know. And I was like, okay, well, where's the Bigfoot's bones? Well, they live on the other side of the universe. There's a different realm they walk through. That's why we don't ever have their bones. I'm like, okay, we can't be friends over
Well,
Bigfoot anymore. We can be friends, but not over Bigfoot because
I'll,
we're on two opposing teams.
well, I mean, well, opposing teams on this type of stuff is how good
I
debates
like a good
happen. But
debate, by the way.
yeah, it's how good debates happen. But I mean, and it has been proposed by many paranormal investigators that Bigfoot may be interdimensional. That he may be crossing over to our dimension for some reason, food or something, and it may, if they die here, they may just kind of evaporate like ash almost, and like they have to, if they're in a different dimension, who knows what happens when they pass. And I just saw an article the other day that's, or something the other day, that supposedly bones have been found of a Bigfoot, but I didn't really look into it because you see things on Facebook and you can't always trust that they're actually real.
I know.
But
I know. Yeah, I mean, look, if someone had some sort of proof or something, but when the people who commit the hoax tell you that it's a hoax, I tend to believe them. Sort of like there were those girls in England who kept taking pictures of themselves as fairies everywhere and saying that there were fairies all over England and Ireland. And then later it was discovered those were just them taking pictures of themselves and using trick photography. And for me, it's
well,
like I had fun believing in the fairies, but once they told me, I was like, okay, that's a fun hoax too.
I mean, I will say, I mean, are you talking about when you say the people who created said there's a hoax? Are you talking about the Patterson Gimlin film?
Yes, yes.
Because they actually came out years ago and said that it's not a hoax. Just the one of them who said it, whether it was Patterson or Gimlin or one of the other two guys that was with them, he said that just because he was sick of getting attention for it, and he didn't want to do conventions or any of that anymore. So he said it just to get out of the attention. But I think he said on his deathbed like it wasn't a hoax.
Who knows? And guess what? I hope he did say that, even if it was a hoax. Because to me, this is the kind of stuff that's magical, whether it's real or not. So that's why I was open to debate, because your opinion, my opinion, it until we find proof, it's just thoughts and hopes and what we can imagine for. And I am down for all of it, man. Like I want to live in a world with fairies and Bigfoots and UFOs and things like that. And I know that some are going to be real and some aren't, but until we figure it out, I'll believe what I see with my eyes and what other people tell me they've seen. And if
Yep.
someone, like I said, whether we're right or wrong on the Bigfoot thing, whether they committed the hoax or not, it's still a fun thing to be a part of, whether it's real or not. Does that make sense?
I,
I'm down for either.
it does make sense, and I will say this though: what most of us who are really into the paranormal field believe is that the Patterson Gimlin film, the creature you see in that film, there was not technology back then to either A, make a fake film like that, or B, to make a suit like that that looks that authentic. In the 60s when this film was taking, or 70s, whenever it was, there was not any Hollywood studio that could make a suit that realistic. There was not. I mean, if you look at Harry and the Hendersons that came out in what, the late 80s? And that was the best Bigfoot suit they could make back in the 80s. Like they couldn't make that in the 60s and 70s. Like no one's doing that.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't know. What do I know? Because it doesn't mean that one of their wives or somebody didn't buy a suit somewhere. Or I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. And like I said earlier, I kind of hope it's all real. But when it comes to something like a creature that no one has ever been able to catch or find or videotape except once in its entire history, like the Loch Ness or Bigfoot or something, then it is a little bit harder. Like
well,
yeah, go ahead.
I actually had a guest who was supposed to be in my show a couple times now, but she's really busy because she's the international she's the head of the International Dracontology Alliance, which means she basically researches like sea serpents, sea monsters, that type of thing. And she spends a lot of time up in Lake Champlain looking for Champ. She spends a few times a year over in Loch Ness
Champ
looking for
terrifies my
Nessie.
wife, by the way. I don't know why. She watched it one thing about Champ, and my wife's been terrified of Champ ever since.
Well, I mean, the idea of the idea of a dinosaur still living in the lake is terrifying to anybody. But I mean, it's just, and this woman I was supposed to have in my show, she posts things on Facebook all the time that is sonar photos, videos, and honestly, I believe in Loch Ness now more than I ever did because the stuff she posts like makes you believe.
Hey, I look. If you show me stuff like that, maybe I would too. I'm just saying from what I've seen and stuff, it's harder for me to believe. But sure, that was actually the next thing I was going to say. I was going to say, look, with Champ and Bigfoot or especially Nessie, you feel like if there was good enough sonar, which we have, if they can find the Titanic, they could find Nessie that is moving. Titanic wasn't even moving. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Like you said, if they have it, I'd be interested in seeing it. But yeah, I feel like once technology started to catch up with some of these things, that's when I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like maybe there weren't suits back then, or maybe, they could have faked it because technology is so good. It's so hard to tell until you get to the point where future catches up to the thing, and we can almost like examine it better. Does that make sense? Like we are with sonar.
It makes a lot of sense, and I will say it's probably to some degree true. I mean, because well, the thing though is though, if these are interdimensional beings, they most likely have ways to avoid being caught on footage of camera or video. I mean, they have.
I'm not against that. You're not wrong. But I will say this, and this is what happened with me and my Loch Ness friend, who I again, I am still a huge fan of, or not my Loch Ness friend, of Bigfoot, and always have been. Like I even remember when in school when you could order books to buy, I always bought this kind of stuff. It was always about Bigfoot. It was always about something like this, Bermuda Triangle, UFOs. But when he was like every excuse, I was like, well, what if? He's like, no, they could evaporate then. I was like, well, what about this? Well, they don't poop. What about this? No, they don't pee either. All right. Well, what about? I was like, how do you know all these things? He's like, I don't, but I've answered these questions enough to know that these are possibilities. And I'm like, all right, well, then anything's possible, right? Because you can always say, but what if?
Well, I mean, that's true, and a lot of the paranormal field is just what ifs. I mean, that's the problem is that with people who are skeptics, is a lot of the paranormal field is what ifs, and we don't have to find answers, but I mean, I've seen enough pictures of where supposedly Bigfoots, where supposedly dogmen, where supposedly sea lake creatures that I can believe because I've seen these pictures on social media, and even if half of them are fake, the half that aren't fake are still enough to make me believe. I mean, it only takes one decent picture to make you be like, all right, there's something there. There is something there. I don't know what it is, but there's something there.
Yeah, I get it. I'm with you because I'm also one of those people who wants to believe. Even though I can be skeptical, I still am always skeptical because I want to believe. Does that make sense? Almost like the X Files. It was
I was
like
just
they
gonna
were.
say that's a Fox Mulder. That's a Fox Mulder right there.
That's me, man. I was like Fox Mulder. I do believe. I've seen. I just want to believe in the next one and the next one. And so show me more proof. I'm hungry for it.
Well, well, put it this way. I fully believe in aliens, and let's jump over to that again. Because
All right.
there was, I don't know if you've heard of this, but back when Truman was president, there was an alien named Valiant Thor, who was a Norse alien, they described them as, because they look like people from Finland, Sweden. They look like Norse people. And this extraterrestrial supposedly came to the White House and the Pentagon for weeks at a time and was talking to people, the government officials, and talking to Truman. And there's pictures of him sitting like behind Truman when Truman's giving speeches. But because he looks just like any other human, most people didn't question it. And Truman's daughter later confirmed this happened because she was around and she met it. She met this creature. So that is one of my most that's one of the extraterrestrial experiences in this world that I fully believe happened
Great.
because there's so much
Tell you what, I
so
bet
much
you
proof.
if I looked into it, I would love it, whether I believe or not, because it's right up my alley. But yeah, man, once you see enough people that are sane say things, because here's the sad part, to be honest with you. Sad part is people think of you as foolish or mentally ill if you believe in things like this. You know what I mean? Sometimes. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about myself also. Everybody involved in stuff like this. They go, they must be mentally ill. But there's also a stigma about having mental illnesses like depression or anxiety. Why? Why? When we all know someone with depression and anxiety isn't a harm or threat to the world, they're a harm and threat to themselves. You know what I mean? And if someone wants to believe in Bigfoot, they are not a harm or threat to anyone else, and maybe not even to themselves. So, what is the big deal about looking into these things? Because if the people like us that want to believe and do believe and have seen some things don't speak up, people are just going to be seeing the other people who you'll never believe. Does that make sense?
It does 100%, and I will say though that I mean, part of the reason for my show being called what it is that paranormal is becoming the new normal. More people believe in this stuff now than don't, because all these, I mean, what Discovery Plus app and all these other there's so many shows now about these creatures, about different phenomenon that are paranormal, that more people are believing in this stuff than ever before. I
Yeah,
mean, when I was a kid, if I asked someone if they believe in Bigfoot, maybe 2 out of 5 would say, "Oh, I know what that is." 3 out of 5 wouldn't. Now you ask 5 people if they know of Bigfoot or if they believe in Bigfoot, all 5 are gonna say they know what Bigfoot is. But, I mean, you may only get 4 out of 5 that believe, but you're still gonna have 5 that know what a Bigfoot is because they've seen
of
enough of it.
course. And then more people, I think, knew a little bit more about it once Finding Bigfoot kind of got popular. Right? Wouldn't you agree? Because people who didn't know about it or anything back then at least got to know more about it. And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I wasn't about to say anything, but,
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say, but yeah, like Finding Bigfoot, they should have changed that name to just Bigfoot because they never found him. You know what I mean? Like they were finding people who had great stories, but man, I always wish that they were. I every week I would tune in and be like, I wish you were more on the trail of this guy. You know what I mean? And not just whatever that crazy man's name was that would go out there and howl all night.
yeah, Bobo. But I I mean, here's the thing. If you want real documentaries about this stuff where they actually find not exactly, they don't have evidence of a Bigfoot per se, but Small Town Monsters is a production company, a very indie independent production company that they have done 9 or 10 documentaries at least now on different subjects, a few on Bigfoot, but they actually went to the Olympic project out in off the coast of Washington, and they have footage in their film of Bigfoot nest, because the Olympic project is a section of Washington by the coast that's closed off to the public. It's a government-run area, and there are dozens of Bigfoot nests set up alongside each other around there, or what they believe to be Bigfoot nests, because no other animal we know of would make this kind of creation.
Crazy.
So, I mean, I always recommend to everybody Small Town Monsters. If you want to watch a real documentary about people who care about cryptids and want to discover them for good reasons, watch their stuff because they actually care and they want to believe. They want to prove this stuff is real, and
Very
they will
cool.
do their. They actually just shot a new one up in Alaska that hasn't released yet, but they shot the last one is up in Alaska,
Wow.
and that's supposed to be a Bigfoot hotspot because it's so isolated. So, I mean, I, I mean,
And
it's
by the way, I was
it's
going to say one thing that you also had brought up earlier when you said that Nessie is a dinosaur. I believe that there are still creatures out there that we haven't discovered. Just like under the sea, there are so many creatures that every year they're like, by the way, cameras have just gotten down to 50,000 feet below, and now we have this new fish that we never saw before. So why is it unrealistic to think that there's some sort of creature that lived in a lake for 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, or is the second or the third that's lived there?
it's not unbelievable because they've proven that that Loch Ness has caves that go out to the ocean at the bottom of it. So why 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 is it so hard for anybody to believe that a possible dinosaur type creature uses Loch Ness to lay its eggs and raise its young, and then it goes back out to the ocean for the rest of the year?
It's a possibility. I'm not ruling it out. Is it for sure? Who knows? Who knows? Like the Loch Ness one never got me that much, only because it was such a weird, blurry photo. I wish it was more like the video we saw of Bigfoot, because just to have this blurry photo of like a bent finger coming out of water never
Yeah,
made sense to me. I'm like, where the hell's the rest of this guy? Where's his eyeballs? Where's his mouth? Where's his face?
I mean, There are better pictures and videos out there nowadays that might make you more of a believer, but all you have to do is Google them. But the thing is, there's reports of other living dinosaurs in different parts of the world as well. I mean, there's Macaulay Mbembe in the Congo in Africa, who is supposed to be like a brontosaurus or a species like that, and the natives in that part have been reporting it for hundreds of years. When white men first went down there, the natives like said, like, we have this creature that fights with hippos. It lives in the water, and the name Macaulay Mbembe means it who stops the flow of water. So, and I mean, they went through a book of like all these creatures that can live in water and pointed out to the natives, like, is it this? Is it this? And they said no every time until they saw a picture of a dinosaur, and they said that's what it is.
Wow.
And I mean, there's also in Chile, South America, there's reports of in one area of the jungle, there's reports of raptors, like velociraptors that still live there, and the tribe that lives near them worships them and tells tourists, "Don't go in the woods or you will not come back." And it's happened a few times. Tourists have gone in the woods and not come back. I mean,
Yeah.
whether the
And who
tribe's
knows?
killing them off, I mean, who knows? But
Right. And who knows what happened? But sure, it's a possibility. Look, like I said, I'm definitely not a full time skeptic. I'm more like, Mulder and Scully. I've seen stuff and I believe, and I want to believe in the next thing, or I want to expose that it's a phony so that I can move on to the next one.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
At least to
that's a good way.
myself. I don't need to expose it to the world. I just mean for me, for fun, because it is a fun little thing to do on the side. And then there is a science part to it, because when it comes to UFOs, even scientists and the US government are admitting, yes, there are UFOs. Like, we
Yep.
kept it from you long enough.
Yeah, I mean, they basically released it as try to be a distraction from COVID, but because of COVID, barely anybody paid attention to the announcement. It basically got wiped. I mean, or even they released it during that time just because they knew people wouldn't pay attention to that announcement. They would just be like, "But what about the new COVID vaccine coming out?" Like that's what they're looking at, not the fact that
Sure,
the government
everybody's in the
admits
middle of
there's
a
aliens.
pandemic. We didn't care about aliens.
Well, I did. As soon as I saw that, I was like, "What?" But
Yeah, of
like
course.
it was the biggest news break for me in 30 years. But
Right. Right. Yeah, I always wish that they would release better stuff when they say things like this, though. It's always more, you get a classified document with like black lines all over it, and it says black, 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 alien ship, black, 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 black. Like, what? What's in this?
exactly. I mean, well, they have released a bunch of documents now that you can read fully, and I mean, you just gotta know where to find them, like on the Pentagon website or the U.S. Congress website. You gotta know where to find them. And the last thing I will say about dinosaurs, though, is in the American Southwest, there's been reports of 50, 60 years now, at least, of pterodactyl or pterosaurs that have seen like there's even been reports of them picking up like dogs and small children from front yards and trying to fly away with them. There's a famous one out of the Southwest where one kid was playing in his front yard, a pterodactyl like creature picked it up, started flying away with it, and the father and all the neighbors started shooting at it, and eventually it dropped the kid. And it just flew off into like the distance.
We live in a wacky world. I'm not going to lie. Really, when people are still discovering things under the ocean, I'm like, then what's the problem with finding things in the sky? It's much bigger, you know? Or in a jungle that we haven't really looked through because you can't see into. There's
Hmm.
there's so many creatures we haven't even discovered. Whether it's a prehistoric ant that's in South America or whatever. Just saying, there's so many things that it's not impossible. Like, if we saw a duck-billed platypus today, we'd think we saw an alien because we've never seen one of those before.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like the Tasmanian tiger. Like they're little tigers basically. And we just recently found footage of one in black and white that was taken in like the 30s or 40s or something like that,
Right,
or maybe in 50s. But people supposedly have seen them lately. Like in Tasmania, they've seen them lately, supposedly like still alive, but they were
right.
supposed to be extinct for 70 years now.
Or like, yeah, there's so many things like that. It's crazy.
I mean, my favorite example when it comes to oceans is the Greenland shark. It was, it can live for 300 to 400 years, and they just recently found one, and we thought we never knew they existed. They just recently took a picture of one, like a
Right.
nice clear picture, and they classified it. So,
Tortoises can live, what, 150, 200 years? I mean,
oh,
it's not.
so,
Yeah.
some can live like up to 300, I think.
Yeah.
But it's just we discover new stuff on this earth every year, and
Exactly. So,
usually it's bugs or small reptiles, stuff that's easily hid or can hide and lives in like caves where we don't go normally. Normally, it's that type of stuff or oceanic stuff that we just can't find because it's so rare and so deep. But it's every once in a while though we find new mammals. I mean, we find new monkeys every 5 or 6 years. We find new monkeys in the jungle, different species and whatnot. So
and some of these are probably creatures that started myths. You know what I mean? Like they say, like there's a gray gorilla that people used to think was a ghost gorilla or some. I don't know what I'm saying, but you know what I mean. People see
I
certain things and call it something else because they never seen something like it.
I do. I mean, gorillas themselves were one of the original cryptids because the natives would say there's these big hairy men looking things that live in the jungle, and they didn't know what to call it. And eventually, we classified them as gorillas because they were real and they were living in the jungle and they walk like men and they look like big hairy men. So who knows? I mean, it's just there's so much stuff out there we haven't discovered yet, and that will be discovered eventually. But hopefully, it's not because we killed them all out doing something stupid.
Yeah, I hope not.
I mean, personally, I hope so too. I mean, because I want to believe in everything, but it's the only thing. I had someone ask me this once, and they said, like, if there's one cryptid that you had to say you don't believe in and that you think is very unlikely to ever be found and proven true, what
Yeah,
would it be? And my answer was the chupacabra,
that's
because
a
I feel like the chupacabra, if anything, is an alien. So it's not really a cryptid. It's just an alien species that we don't know about.
sure. Or it could just be, an old tale of people telling their kids, don't go out there. There's a chupacabra, but really it's, wolves or something else. Who knows? They just want their kids to stay safe. Some of these things, not all, but some were just meant to control people. Don't go over there because there's a creature that will eat you. There's no creature.
Exactly. I mean, they could all be like a lot of these could be the boogeyman stories we tell our kids to keep them safe.
Of
But
course. And like that jackrabbit one, whatever that's called, a jackalope.
a jackalope, yeah. But that was a tall tale. There's a lot of tall tales that have been told by early Americans, like because they were
Sure.
bored out in the
Paul
front.
Bunyan and all that.
I mean, they're bored out in the frontier and they need something to believe in and something to tell stories about around the campfire night while they were drinking.
Of
So,
course. Of course.
I
And
mean,
who's
the
to say that the chupacabra isn't that? But for, Latinos and whoever else.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there. I mean, supposedly they did have a chupacabra body, and they said like this doesn't match anything else that we have on Earth, like genetically. But then the body, of course, disappeared because the government does what they do.
Sure.
So who knows? But I mean, it's just the way it is, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, it's here's the thing. The reason I also find this kind of stuff interesting is because you could be poo-pooed on it for years, and then all of a sudden the government says, actually, there are UFOs. There you go.
Exactly. And if you think the government doesn't know that there's a Bigfoot, you be out of your mind because there's been stories of like forest fires out west by where you live, and these Bigfoot, like in one, a Bigfoot comes scrambling out of the forest, all burnt up, half alive, and an ambulance came. They put it in the ambulance. They listened to its bowels and everything else, and tried to help it as best they could. But then, as soon as the ambulance takes down the road, a black car stops them, and neither ambulance worker is ever heard from again. The government makes them either keep quiet and change their identities and move, or the government just disposes of them and takes care of the Bigfoot themselves. Like that's just the way it goes.
So I wanted to say to you on this sort of same subject about how the government sort of tells you the narrative. I know this isn't paranormal, but it's conspiracy. But I wanted to throw something out there. People are always asking me because I do study the JFK stuff. They're like, who do you think shot Kennedy? Well, I think it was a lot of people, and I don't know the reasons why. But there were three people that are definitely people who did the shooting, and they're called the Three Tramps. Did you ever follow this at all? So there were three tramps up on the grassy knoll, and one of them is the father of Woody Harrelson. It's Woody Harrelson's dad. Woody Harrelson's dad was one of these three tramps being walked out by a police officer. Now, when you look at the pictures of them, that police officer, no one recognized him. They were like, he doesn't work for the Dallas Police Department. So there's a man dressed like a policeman walking three what they call tramps back then, hobos, bums, out.
Yeah.
These men were up on the grassy knoll when it all took place, and they were being walked out. But the reason I know that it had to be Woody Harrelson's dad as one of the shooters is because that's what he did for a living. He had assassinated different people. He spent time in jail for assassinating a judge. He died in jail because he assassinated a judge. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's not paranormal, but it's definitely so many questions about this and so much government cover up and weird things like that, where you've got photos of people that no one else, knows where they disappeared to or who they were, or, and you're like, well, we do know some of them. One of them's Woody Harrelson's dad. Why didn't you ask him?
Well, I mean, and conspiracies are paranormal to some degree because there are things that we can't explain, which basically is what paranormal is. But as far as the JFK thing goes, I always believed it was the government that shot him. Somebody the government hired took him out because he was trying to change things too much, and the rest of the government didn't like it, so they were trying to take him out, like the big people, like the cabals, that New World Order, like they didn't like it, so they were trying to control things, so they took him out.
Could be. I've never been able to figure out who I think did it because there's so many possibilities. You've got, people saying it was the Cubans. You've got people saying it was the government. You've even got people saying, oh, it was LBJ, or other people within his own group. So there's a million theories. So I don't know why they did it. I just seem to know a couple of the ones that did do it. But the reason I got so into it was I was going through Dealey Plaza one day, and this guy recognized me from Last Comic Standing. I used to be on a show called Last Comic Standing on NBC.
Oh, I
And
know that show. Yeah.
yeah, and I walked over, and he goes, "Hey, man, I want you to meet my friend. He wrote this book." And I go over there, and he introduces me to this guy who wrote the book that the JFK movie was based off of. God, what's his name? He's a good friend of mine too. I'm just gonna drive. It doesn't matter. Marijuana. You're an asshole. Listen. So, he says to me, Dante, you and your pretty wife want to go on a real JFK tour? I said, sure. He goes, well, I get off in an hour. I like to sell my wares out here. Why don't you guys go take the tour inside the book depository? So that's a museum now. We go up there, and it's very clear. You get to stand exactly where he was. It's very clear that you can't get those shots from where he was in that building. Just as
Yeah.
someone who shoots, I could tell. I'm like, there's no possible way. So you go, okay, there's no magic bullet. That was just some bullshit made up by the Warren Commission. This bullet that supposedly went through Kennedy's neck and into, Governor Connolly's knee and then back out, and then through Kennedy's head on the way back out, and through the, his clavicle and Connolly's, right wrist, or whatever this magic bullet did. Instead of them saying multiple people shot, which every witness kept saying there was, we heard multiple shots, not one. But anyway, so after this, he takes us on a tour. And what really changed my mind about everything was he goes, let's time things. He goes, look up right now what it says, when they say that Oswald ran from the book depository, they say 10 minutes later, he had run to this other neighborhood and he shot a cop. He goes, we're going to get in my car, and it's going to take us longer than 10 minutes to drive there. So we get in his car, we drive to this place where the cop was shot. Sure enough, it's about 15 minutes. Then he goes, from here, 5 minutes later, he's supposedly at the Texas Theater. So he
Yep.
drives there. That's a half-hour drive. We get to the Texas Theater, and there's no way he could have been there minutes later. So could he have gotten there by going straight there? Absolutely. Was he involved? Sure. I believe all of that. Was he a patsy? Of course. But I'm just saying, when people say, well, we know who did it, it was Oswald, I'm like, there's no possible way he was the one shooting. Everyone who was there told the government it came from the grassy knoll.
Yep.
But
That's
again,
I mean,
you said the
I've
government
always heard that too.
much, so much. You know, even the Warren Commission is a big cover up.
Well, I mean, the government and their cover-ups can go back hundreds of years to even ancient governments had cover-ups. I mean, the governments are gonna do what they wanna do, and they're gonna lie to the public and say whatever they wanna say to cover something up. That's just the way it goes. I mean, I always question the JFK because I mean, you learn one thing in school, but you know, like, if you're at least somewhat intelligent, you know that's not true. You know there's some holes in that theory and that facts they try to sell you. But I don't know. I mean, it's just
And there's so
yeah.
many weird coincidences. I mean, think about this. Right after he was killed, all of a sudden Jack Ruby, people were like, "Oh, he's just a patriot who wanted him dead." No, he wanted him to shut the fuck up. That's why he killed him immediately. Jack Ruby went there, you know, the next day and shot him immediately. This guy was a mobster. He was a well-known mobster. There's no other reason for him to quiet this man, you know. Um, yeah, and then just like who was it? There was I forget her name, a very famous um, 1950s reporter had a big meeting with Jack Ruby one night, and he gave her all the information from his jail cell. On the way home, she went off the road and was killed.
Oh, I've heard about that. I've
Yeah,
heard about that. Yeah.
right. She finally gets the big story, and then she's killed, and there's no notes of her conversation. Give me a break.
I mean, yeah, it's all a little bit too conspicuous for me to ever believe that the government's not cleaning up their mess.
Yep.
But I mean, let me ask you this though. What do you think of the moon landing in '69? Do you think that was true
I'll,
or no?
I think it's true, and I'll tell you why. I grew up on a military base at the time, China Lake, and if they were going to film it anywhere, it would have been there because we look like the face of the moon. But that's not why they were there. My father was actually in charge of any visitors to the base. So in my home, we had all the astronauts, we had everybody, and they were really out there training every day for this mission. They were getting ready for it. No one was faking it. No one was faking it on this base because if you're going to fake it on the base, this would have been the fake base. There was nothing out there at the time more secretive or hard to get onto than my stupid base, which I hated because it was hard to get on and off, and I lived on it. But yeah, man, I know that there's a lot of theories, and I, as a stand-up, I even had a joke about it. I used to say, you know, everybody remembers seeing the moon land and it coming down and him jumping off. Who was filming? But then, of course, you know that it had arms on it with cameras, and it was set up to film the moon landing, and it was all, supposed to happen like that. So, am I 100% sure about anything in this world? No. But I can say that because I lived on such a weird, secretive base, and my dad was so heavily involved, and he's the kind of person who would have exposed any sort of government cover up. Um, I don't think that was not real. I believe it's real, and here's why too. I mean, people have done it since then, and a million times over, we've all gone to space and other things, and it's just not that inconceivable to me. It's like saying, did people really land in America? I don't know. Did they, or was it Portugal and they walked here? I don't know, but I do know with this, my father was involved in it, and I have a lot of the old shit. I'm even selling something on eBay right now. It's what do they call those? Challenge coins. That's from 1969, July 1st, and it's got all their names: Collins, Aldrin.
Armstrong and all that, yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah.
let me ask you this, because a lot of people say, and myself included, if you watch the video from the conference after they landed, it looks on their faces like they're all terrified of something they saw up there.
Who knows? But I mean, shit, man, I could say that about every time. They did come home to their wives, right? You see my face, been gone for a long time and come home. And let's not forget, we also make it seem like life is easy when you're an astronaut or anyone else in the public eye. I
Well,
can't
it's
even
not.
imagine how these poor guys felt. And they weren't, I thought they were kids. I thought they were like, 20 something. These are 39-year-old men that went into space. And most of them were about 39 years old. And imagine how terrifying it is, and how shitty their lives must have been. Like, yes, we can go, well, they were American heroes, but I promise you, their parents were screaming at them, don't do this. And their wives were saying, you have a child, please don't. Give it to your buddy, let him go. And, I feel like I know this because as someone who, I don't know, has seen things like this in real life, that stuff like this happens a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there was. I've heard reports too that some of them actually said like as they're getting near the end of their lives, they would say to people like, "We were being watched up there. Like something was watching us on the moon, and something was
Hey,
actually on the moon watching us."
maybe, who knows, man. I don't know, really. Like, I don't even know. And I'm sure that there's a lot of bullshit. Like, I know 20 people from my dad's work that all had golf balls that supposedly had been on the moon. Really? They would have had to fill the fucking ship with golf balls to bring back that many for all the people that claim they have a moon golf ball. So of course there's a lot of bullshit and lying going on, whether it's meaningful or not. But yeah, man, I believe that the moon landing happened. But for sure, could something have been on the moon? Absolutely. Could they have been terrified about it and told not to talk? Fuck yeah. Maybe that's why we don't go back to the moon all the time. No one wants to see
I was
this
just
creature that's going to
I
kill it.
I was just gonna say that, and I've also had people on this show before tell me that they've they've heard theories and they believe it that the moon is hollow, that it's like a Death Star almost, that like there's some society living inside of it.
Who knows? And I mean, that's a theory, just like my theory of do people go back in time to come watch us? Who knows? They're all good theories, though. It's fun to think about, and it gives us something
Exactly.
to expand our minds with. But man, I had a great time being on here today, and it was a lot of fun talking about this stuff. Like I said, I never really talk about it. I'm glad you asked me about the moon landing because I didn't even realize how close I was to it until you asked. Um, and also, my father-in-law, my wife's dad, he was in Vietnam. But what's crazy is we just took him to before he died. We took him to the Veterans Association to see if they could help him financially because he had Alzheimer's. And when we were there, the guy looked him up by his social and what ship he was on and all this stuff. And he's like, "Oh my God, you're one of the men that pulled John Glenn out of the ocean." And my wife screams. She's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, that was me." And she's like, "What? Why didn't you ever tell me this? That's insane." So apparently he was the guy, one of the guys who found the pod in the water, and the USS Turner pulled up and they grabbed him and pulled him
Okay.
onto the ship.
That's cool, right? That's cool.
Yeah,
Imagine just find that out about your parent like 40, 50 years later, like like, oh my God, like you were one of them. Like it just it's like it's crazy. It'd be like finding out like from your grandfather on his deathbed, oh yeah, I was one of the US agents that showed up at Roswell.
right, right. Wait, why didn't you tell me this? I didn't think you'd care.
And that, of course, that's what they'd say because they were old timers and they were just kept quiet about everything. But well, it has been a pleasure having you on, Dante.
Thanks,
100%.
buddy.
It's been a fun episode.
Tell
Any
people to watch me. I then go to my social media. It's Dante the Comic on everything. Dante the Comic. I think on Facebook it's my name that's spelled out here: Rusciolelli. Try that on for size, everybody. And yeah, I have some movies I've directed. You can watch too. I directed a movie called Bro, What Happened. I don't even know where it is. Torrent it, stream it, get it off of YouTube. It's very funny. It stars Jamie Kennedy, Bobby Lee, myself, and a whole bunch of other people. It's like The Hangover meets Superbad. And then I did a
I've
war
heard of
movie
it.
I directed. Yeah, it's very fun. I did a war movie I directed and star in called Unfallen with Michael Madsen and James Hong, and we shot it in like 3 countries. It was really fun. And we're doing a new horror movie called House of Karma that'll be out next year, that we wrote and we're producing and stuff in November.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. So to all my listeners, be sure to check out those movies. It sounds incredibly. I've heard of Bro What Happened. I definitely have heard of that one. I
it's so
know I
fun.
have.
I love Bro, What Happened. It's such a fun movie. These kids wake up after a crazy party and things have happened to them and they need to figure out what happened before this guy's girlfriend shows up. And it's just a fun romp with a lot of celebrities in like every scene.
It
And
sounds like Dude, Where's My Car meets The
right,
Hangover.
right, right, right. It's kind of like that,
So
man. So fun. Or super bad meets the hangover. Yeah. It's
yeah,
so,
kind of. I can see that too.
yeah. Well, have a good one, man. It was fun chatting with you and debating and talking about all this. I had a fun time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely been a good episode. And for all my listeners, you can find me at Paranormal New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings a podcast with a S Facebook group. You can find me on Twitter as at Juggalo Bastard and on the gram as that. And you could find us on YouTube as Paranormal New Normal and on TikTok as Juggalo Bastard Podcast. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And I'll be sure to catch up you all next time. And to our guest Dante to drop off, but I thank him for being on. And I will be back, I believe, on Wednesday with a new episode. Thank you for watching.